Alright, what's going on, guys? This is Ron Wesson. I'm back with episode 2 of MMA Talk. This time we are going to be previewing Bellator 173 that's this Friday, February 24th. I was wrong about that last week. Or actually, not last week, Monday, when I said that I didn't think there was a card this week. I was wrong. Bellator 173 from Belfast, Northern Ireland, from the SSE Arena. The main event is going to be Liam McGarry, former Bellator light heavyweight champion. He is going up against Brett McDermott now. It started off he was supposed to be going against Chris Fields, and Chris Fields got injured and had to pull out of the fight. Well, Chris Fields was replaced by a guy by the name of Vladimir Filipovic, who was going to be making his Bellator debut. So last night, just to make sure I did this right and did it exactly the way I wanted to and everything, last night I took notes leading up to this. And I took a ton of notes off Sherdog and a little bit of Wikipedia and so on and so forth. I just researched, especially Vladimir Filipovic, because I had never heard of him before. Well, little did I know, I was on lunch today and I look, and he has also been injured and has pulled out of the fight, and he is now being replaced by Brett McDermott. So I took probably an hour and 20 minutes worth of notes last night on this card, and probably 30 plus minutes was on him, and that's all out the window now. But it wasn't necessarily a main talking point anyway. I was just trying to find out as much as I could about him. The main talking point for this card is Liam McGarry. This will be Liam's first fight back after losing the Bellator light heavyweight championship to Phil Davis. Liam got dominated in that fight, really. And it was the first loss of his career. And Liam has shown in his career to have very good jiu-jitsu off his back. I mean, very good jiu-jitsu. He's hit a couple inverted triangles on people. He defeated Tito Ortiz with an inverted triangle. He's pulled off a couple arm bars. I mean, he has real submission ability off his back. He actually won the title from Emmanuel Newton by spending more than, 85% of that fight, he was on his back. Emmanuel kept taking him down, and Liam caught him in triangle after triangle after armbar, so on and so forth. I mean, it nearly submitted him on multiple occasions, and Emmanuel just kept taking him down. He would get almost to the brink of defeat, where he was going to have to tap, and he would somehow get out of it, and they would go into a different little scramble, and he'd end up in another submission. It was wild. Liam won the light heavyweight championship from him in that matter, and then defended the belt against Tito Ortiz, in which he caught Tito with an inverted triangle from the bottom. That did not work against Phil Davis, which a lot of people had assumed that it would not. Phil said, "Oh, you're cool with wrestlers taking you down. You think you're going to do that? Well, I've got a pretty good jiu-jitsu game myself, and that's not going to fly with me." And Phil took him down at will and just did what he wanted to Liam. The scorecards to that fight was a 50-43, a 50-45, and a 50-44 all for Phil, which means one judge threw in two 10-8 rounds, one judge threw in one 10-8 round, and the other one just scored it this square 5-0 Phil. Which there really should have been some 10-8 rounds in there, to be honest. I mean, he was just taken down. Phil had his way with him, really. Which people expected Phil to come over and do that, and when Phil came over and had such a hard time with King Mo, people were like, well, maybe Phil's not just going to walk his way through the title. Once he got the actual title match with Liam, he basically did that. And it's really tough for Liam now too, because Liam, as far as talent wise, could quite possibly be. I mean, he's possibly in the top 3 best light heavyweights they have there. I mean, he was the champion for a reason. But he is totally okay with letting wrestlers take him down, and he tries to work from the bottom. And he's going to beat a lot of people with that. If you want to take me down, you don't want to stand with me, because he's primarily a striker. And he has very good striking. He's 6'6" and 205 pounds. I mean, the guy is very tall for that weight class. And he lights people up on the feet, but when people don't want to stand with him, they try to take him down. He just allows it. And he's like, okay, I'm just going to work my submissions. But Phil Davis is the champ now. That's not really going to work on him. Bellator has King Mo. I just have the feeling that's not going to work on King Mo either. And then they're signing Ryan Bader, if he's already been signed. I don't know if Bellator has officially announced it yet or not, but the UFC officially announced that they had let Bader walk. That's not going to work on Bader either. I think that I might be wrong about this, but I think the only time Bader's ever been submitted in his career was by Tito Ortiz, when Tito caught him in just the crazy guillotine and upset Bader. But you've got those 3 guys who can all take Liam down, and he's going to have a tough time submitting them. He can submit them. That's not really a bad top 5 if you think about it. Bellator has right there when you throw in Phil, King Mo, Liam, Ryan Bader, and Emmanuel Newton. I mean, that's a solid top 5 for a light heavyweight division. That light heavyweight division is at least on par with what the UFC has right now. Their light heavyweight division is hurting, really. I mean, you got DC with the belt. Rumble is going to fight DC. Then you got Glover and you got Gus, but Gus hasn't fought. Alexander Gustafsson, for people who don't know when I say Gus. You got those 4. Gus hasn't fought in forever. Glover did not look... Well, he looked okay. He did not look up to standard in his last fight when he fought... I should have had this pulled up. The guy's name is Jared Cannonier. When he fought Jared Cannonier at UFC 208, he took Cannonier down at will and just pretty much just rode out a decision, and the crowd did not appreciate it. They booed him, and he actually said himself that he was disappointed in his performance. But when John Jones comes back, that's going to help out. But at the same time, if you think about it, how much is it going to help out? Because John's going to come back, and he's beat every single one of those people that I named except for Rumble. And that's a lot of people are pulling for Rumble to beat DC so they can see that matchup. But you never know. That's neither here or there. We're going to talk about Bellator on this one. So yeah, but the top 5 they have right there at Bellator's, it's solid. And Liam has a ton of talent, but man, there's a lot of 3 guys for sure he's going to have a tough time with. But Liam's pretty versatile. He's 11-1 now in his career after losing his title. He has 5 knockouts, 5 submissions, and 1 decision. The 1 decision is when he won the belt, of course. He's going against, like as I said, Brett McDermott this time around, after there's been so many change-ups leading into this. This is his 3rd different opponent, but this guy, I'm assuming, is going to stay in there. Brett McDermott is a former rugby player from Ireland, and he retired from playing professional rugby, and he became a mixed martial arts fighter. And out of the people, the 3 guys, McDermott is really, so far, the best guy that they've given him. He's the third. He was the third option, but he's probably the best fighter out of the three. The notes that I took on Vladimir Filipovich last night, he was 8-2. He had 3 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 2 decisions in his career. He lost his last fight by TKO in the first round. He was 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He has no notable wins to his record. And he lost to Anatoly Tokov. Anatoly Tokov, who is Fedor's pupil, the one that I just talked about in the last video. That he fought on Bellator this past weekend, and he picked up a win. It was his Bellator debut. Vladimir lost to him. The only time this guy has ever been finished, though, in his career was by doctor stoppage. But he pulled out this fight. If not, I think that was going to change. I had actually predicted McGreary to win by second round TKO. But now that Brett McDermott steps in, Brett has a record of 5-3, which is not, according to Wikipedia, Brett doesn't have the record that the Vladimir Filipovich has, but from what I looked at Vladimir, he just didn't appear to be that good. He didn't look like he was going to be that much of a test for Liam, and Liam was going to get back on track. Brett McDermott, on the other hand, he has 2 notable fights on his record. He fought Ollie Thompson, who just fought this past weekend on the Bellator card, who lost to Czech Congo. And he KO'd him in the first round. A minute and 43 seconds he KO'd him. I mean, that's a name, at least, on his record. And his second big fight that he has on his record is he fought King Mo in the Ryzen Heavyweight Grand Prix. King Mo knocked him out. But it was the first round, but they had fought for 9 minutes and 20 seconds when the knockout happened. In Japan, they have the long first round. But yeah, so I mean, he has at least 2 notable names on his list. He's 1-1 against those names. Both matches ended in knockout, and I don't even think I'm going to change my pick for this fight. I'm still taking McGreary by second round TKO. But it's just interesting to see how Liam is going to bounce back after really being dominated and losing his belt, because right there until Phil came in, Liam was Bellator's light heavyweight golden boy. I mean, he beat Emmanuel Newton, who Emmanuel Newton KO'd King Mo, which everybody thought King Mo was going to be the golden boy. He ended up getting beat by Emmanuel Newton. Emmanuel Newton took the belt, and, Liam took it from him and then defended it against Tito Ortiz. So, yeah, I like I said, I'm picking Liam McGreary by second round TKO. I think he gets back on track here. And then we'll see where Bellator takes him from there, what they give him next. But this card, 173, it's a weird card. It's co-promoted between Bellator and BAMMA, BAMMA. It's going to be Bellator 173 and BAMMA 28. BAMMA is a mixed martial arts organization in Europe. It's the biggest mixed martial arts organization in Europe. And the main event, which is not on TV over here for the BAMMA, is Norman Park is fighting. I don't remember the guy's name that he's fighting. But Paul Redman is his name. And, Norman was in the UFC for a little bit. That's not he has a name to him. But the Bellator, the other fights, worth mentioning, because is the strange thing about Bellator is when they put up a big card, like which was supposed to be this past weekend when Fedor was supposed to fight Matt Mitrione. That fight got pulled. Matt Mitrione had to pull out because of kidney stones. I've never personally had kidney stones. My best friend has had them multiple times over the past couple of years since we graduated high school. I think we've been out of high school now for 7 years, and he's gotten kidney stones multiple times. He's had to go to the hospital because of them multiple times, and he's pretty much changed up his diet to where he will not drink anything other than water. And he has told me that, man, it feels like you're gonna die. Which I've been told that a kidney stone is the closest that a man will ever come to knowing the pain of childbirth. And I'll take people's words on that. I do not want them. I hope I never get them. But yeah, but when Bellator puts together a card like that, they have some notable names. Like that card this past weekend, man, it was supposed to be headlined by Fedor and Matt Mitrione. The co-main event was going to be Josh Thompson and Patricio Pitbull. Chet Congo and Ollie Thompson, and then Josh Koscheck fought the Brazilian. I still don't know that guy's name. I've actually got it pulled up right here. Mauricio Alonso. And then they also had a women's fight. Veda Ortega and Brooke Mayo. Brooke Mayo lost that fight due to doctor stoppage in the third round with a minute to go. Her left, I believe it was her left eye, it swole almost completely shut. She had a gigantic hematoma on her left eye. A ton of swelling, and the doctor stopped the fight. But getting back on topic, that was a big card for Bellator, and they had some notable names on it. And when they put them together like that, they can actually put together pretty good cards. But whenever Bellator puts together their lesser shows, almost what would be like a UFC Fight Night, which was Sunday night that followed Bellator, you know, when the UFC puts together a Fight Night card, there might be a lot of no-named fighters on that card. But you also get matchups on those cards like Johnny Hendricks and Hector Lombard, Travis Brown and Derek Lewis. I mean, those are, Derek Lewis and Travis Brown headline the card. They are both top 10 heavyweights. Hector Lombard is the former middleweight champion of Bellator who came over to the UFC. He'd been in the UFC for a while now, but he's an elite level fighter, and so was Johnny Hendricks. Johnny Hendricks at one point in time looked like he was the best 170-pound fighter in the world. He had moved up in weight to 185, and then also Carla Esparza fought on that card. So you have recognizable names. When the Bellator puts together their smaller shows like this, man, it's tough. It's tough as far as name value goes. But they have two. James Gallagher. James Gallagher is a teammate of Conor McGregor at SBG Ireland. He is a 19-year-old kid, and he's a come-up in Bellator, and he has pretty much like that same type of attitude that Conor has. He talks a lot, and he hasn't showed anybody really how good he is yet. He's 5-0 with 4 submissions and 1 decision. But the thing is, he hasn't fought any notable competition, and he was calling out Bubba Jenkins in Bellator, and I just don't know, man. Like, maybe he's good enough. Maybe he is good enough that he could have fought Bubba Jenkins and won. But man, that would have been a huge step up in competition for him. And it's not like Bubba Jenkins is a world beater. It's just that's like the level of competition that he's faced so far that Bubba Jenkins would be a huge step up. James Gallagher is going up against, I'm going to butcher this guy's name, Kirill Medvedovsky. 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 That's what I have wrote down here. I'm going to just say his first name because it's so much easier to pronounce. Kirill has lost 3 out of his last 5 fights. He is 7-3 overall. And he's lost 2 straight. So, I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and say Gallagher picks up the win here again too, and he's gonna improve to 6-0. I predicted James Gallagher to win by decision. I don't think that he submits him because so far it comes off that's what he's shooting for. He has 4 submissions and 1 decision win. Yeah, I'm gonna pick Gallagher by decision. Bellator keeps giving him these level of fighters. They're wanting to let him build, basically the same way they're doing with MVP. They know they might have something there. They might have a diamond in the rough, and you just let him build the same way they're doing MVP, which is Michael Venom Page for people that don't know. They're trying to build them into something, turn them into their own household stars. So, I'm taking James Gallagher by decision, as I said. The next one that's at least somewhat worth noting, I want to say you pronounce this girl's name Sinead. Sinead Kavanagh. And she's also out of SBG Ireland with Conor McGregor and Coach Kavanagh. They have the same last name, but it's of no relation from what I saw. But I want to say her name is Sinead Kavanagh. Her nickname is KO, if that tells you anything. She's 4-0 with 2 knockouts and 2 decisions. She is going up against a lady by the name of Ani Razafasarian. I want to say is how you pronounce this. Some hard last names for me to try to pronounce. And pretty much the same thing with her. I want to say on Sherdog last night, what I saw with the Ani girl was that she had 3 total fights. She was 1-1 and 1 no contest. So 1-1, lost 1, and had 1 no contest. And the one that she had lost was her only fight that she had in Bellator so far. So yeah, man. I'm gonna go ahead and take. I'm gonna take Sinead also by decision. I don't think she finishes the girl, but I could be totally wrong. I've never seen her fight. This is just what I read from her, read about, and she was one of the main talking points in some of the articles that I read and stuff. Very possible. I mean, with the nickname KO, but she's had two KOs and 2 decisions. I mean, it's really a toss up. So yeah, I'm taking Sinead Kavanagh by decision as well. Think both the SBG Ireland teammates, they get the win, both of them by decisions. And then I'm taking, like I said, Liam McGeary by 2nd round TKO. I was going to try, which I will do it again right now just to make sure. I was not able to find the betting lines for this. And I know today is only Wednesday. It's very possible, that I just wasn't looking right, or maybe they hadn't been released, but I was assuming by last night when I was looking, with it being Tuesday and with the card being on a Friday, that they would at least already have the opening lines out, or whatnot. I was not able to find any anywhere, but I will look again right now really quickly to see. Huh. No, I'm really still not seeing anything as far as the betting odds go. Nope. No lines. Not that I'm seeing. For the bigger cards like next week, I'm sure they will probably have betting lines on Bellator 174, which is next Friday. That's March the 3rd. That's a pretty decent card. Let me read that one off real quick. It's going to be Marlos Conan and Julia Budd, and a women's featherweight match. That's actually going to be for the inaugural Bellator Women's Featherweight Championship. Those two, that should be pretty good. And in the co-main event, you got Brandon Gertz and Fernando Gonzalez. I want to say, let me click on him really quick. Was he the one that fought? Yeah, Fernando Gonzalez. He fought MVP in his last fight, and he actually went to a split decision with MVP. Yeah, so he's another young guy that they might have a little something with, but nobody really knows how good MVP is so far. Fernando was the best guy that he had fought so far, and they went to a split decision. But, they got Chris Honeycutt and Kendall Grove. Should be a decent little match. And then Steve Garcia and Joe Tamanglio. That's Baby Joe. Anybody who watches Bellator knows. Last year, he probably had, as far as betting-wise, quite possibly the upset of the year in MMA. He beat Darren Caldwell by guillotine, and I want to say maybe the second round. I can click on him real quick and look. Yes, guillotine in the third round, 9 seconds into the third round. And it actually says right here that they rematched. I did not know that. His very next fight, he fought Darren Caldwell again, and Caldwell beat him by unanimous decision. But anyway, yeah, I want to say he was like a plus 800 or something like that, and ended up submitting Darren Caldwell, which broke his undefeated record. So yeah. Yeah, according to this, that's correct. I did not know that. But that will be Bellator 174, which is next week. And that'll be a halfway decent card. And that's on March 3rd, which is a Friday. And then on Saturday, March the 4th, is UFC 209, which will be Tyron Woodley and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in a rematch for the welterweight title. Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson, Lando Venata, and David Haymuir is what I think that guy's name is. That he's going against. Monday, I could not remember the guy's name, and Rashad Evans and Dan Kelly and Alistair Overeem and Mark Hunt are the main card of that one. That is going to be an amazing card. But I will do previews for both of those next week as well. And then Friday night or Saturday, I will do a review of this Bellator 173 card. That's going to pretty much wrap up the preview for this Bellator 173 card from Belfast, Ireland. But just because this was a review, or not a review, a preview of Bellator 173, this is still my little show that I'm going to do, and it's just going to be MMA talk. So I've got 3 little talking points here that we want to cover, and that's GSP, Ian Mccall, and Roy McDonald and Paul Daley. I'll start with GSP, and as most of you know who follow MMA, GSP officially signed back with the UFC. He is coming back. It is expected that he will be back by around the third quarter of the year. August, September, October, somewhere in that range is what I heard on the MMA Hour from Ariel Helwani. And according to his coaches, which are Freddie Roach and Faraz Zahabi, they would like to see him either fight Conor McGregor, which I don't think is going to happen, because Conor is off wanting to fight Floyd Mayweather, staying away from Khabib and Tony Ferguson. I'm just joking. Like I said, I don't have any dislike for Conor. I actually like him, but it is what it is. And the second fight would be Michael Bisping at 185 pounds for the title. And it's weird because GSP could quite possibly be the GOAT of it in MMA. A lot of people say Anderson Silva in his prime is. I don't know if I agree with it. It could quite possibly be GSP. It really could, man. GSP had 2 losses in his career to Matt Hughes and Matt Serra, both also welterweight champions. And he avenged both of them. He had a trilogy with Matt Hughes, and he finished Matt both times. Matt Serra had quite possibly the greatest upset in MMA history when he stopped George in the first round. And when they rematched, oh, Jesus Christ, George laid the smackdown on him. Just pounded Matt Serra. Knees to the body while Matt Serra was in the turtle position. George just rode him and just knee after knee after knee. And, I mean, he just fought time after time after time against world-class level fighters. And he made them look ordinary. I mean, what he did to Carlos Condit, who's one of my favorite fighters, what he did to Nick Diaz, what he did to Thiago Alves at UFC 100. Thiago at the time was just railroading people, just killing people. George St. Pierre pulled his groin in that fight and took Thiago Alves down at will. I mean, really, it's... Oh, George is something else, man. He really is. But it's the weird thing is he's been gone for 3 years, and when they announced his return, it really didn't excite me that much. Like, I really don't know what they want him to do. Like, if they come back and he fights Conor McGregor, yeah, that's a super fight. That is a flat out super fight. But technically, if he fights Michael Bisping, it's a super fight. I mean, you got the current middleweight champion of the world against the guy who never lost his belt and who could quite possibly be the best fighter, mixed martial artist of all time. And they're going to fight. But the sound of it, for some reason, just doesn't excite me. Would I watch it? Absolutely. But it's not like one of those fights when I hear it and I'm like, oh my God. Like when I hear Khabib and Tony Ferguson. When I heard that they were going to fight, I was like, oh... yes. Like, I'm super excited for that fight. George and Michael, I mean, it's just not the same amount of excitement to me. Like, of course I want to see George come back. My question is, what if they compete and George beats him? Are you telling me George St. Pierre is going to defend the 185-pound title against Yoel Romero and Jacare and Luke Rockhold, possibly Chris Weidman, possibly Gegard Mousasi? There's some big boys fighting at 185 pounds, and George only walks around, from what I've heard, in the high 180s. So he basically wouldn't have to cut weight, period. He'd just be fighting at his walk-around weight, which isn't terrible. I mean, when you don't have to cut weight, you're able to come in at your peak self. I mean, you have not depleted your body whatsoever. But whenever you're going against people like Yoel Romero, who walks around at 200 plus pounds and looks like a walking muscle, he's a walking tank, flying kneeing people in the head, and that could get dangerous really quickly. It really could. But you know, I don't know. We will see more as it gets closer. I'm sure, because even if it is August, September, October, somewhere in that time period that he decides to come back, it will be announced before then. So whenever his opponent is announced, there will definitely be a talking point that we do. And we will cover that from there when that comes along. Second talking point is Ian Mccall. And Jesus Christ, man, does anybody in the world have worse luck right now? He had to pull out of UFC 208, which was his 5th fight in a row that got canceled. And he was on the fight companion the other night for the UFC Halifax card, UFC Fight Night 105, with Joe Rogan and Eddie Bravo. And then he was also on the podcast today that came out, the Big Brown Breakdown with Brendan Schaub. And, you know, they just talked and stuff, but he covered it a little bit, and it was like the first 3 times that it happened, they were not his fault. One of the times the guy got sick. Maybe the second time one of the guys got hurt, and then the third time I think it was Justin Scroggins. Justin Scroggins like missed weight badly, and they pulled the fight. And he there was one of the fights he said they paid him his full pay. He got, which he told Brendan on the Big Brown Breakdown today that his pay is 16 and 16. So it means if he wins, he gets a total of $32,000, which is kind of crazy because at one point in time, just a couple years ago, Ian Mccall was the number 1 ranked 125-pound fighter in the world. He went to a draw with Demetrius Johnson at 125 pounds. I mean, that is saying something. He is currently ranked 6th right now, according to the UFC. And he hasn't fought in God knows how long. I'll go ahead and look that up right now really quickly. It's very possible his last win might have been Brad Pickett. I will find that out very quickly. That is something I should have had written down already, considering that I had him written down as a talking point. No. Yeah. His last fight overall that he had was UFC 183, January 31st of 2015, and he lost a decision to John Lineker. His last win was his fight before that. July 19th of 2014, he fought Brad Pickett in Dublin, Ireland. So yeah, he's had his last 5 fights in a row go out the window. That is amazing. His body is extremely jacked up. The right side of his body, his right arm, I think he said he's had 7 total surgeries on. He can't even make a fist anymore with his right hand, and he's a professional fighter. You can't make a fist, and you're a professional fighter. That's not good, man. That's, obviously. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. But he was having some very, very bad health problems. It was maybe the 4th fight, the one before this one that got canceled. I don't remember off the top of my head who he said he was supposed to fight. But he started having some like really bad problems with his esophagus. And his esophagus was like closing up on him, and he passed out like multiple times in his training camp leading up to that. And he ended up getting sick, and the fight got canceled. Well, this one, UFC 208 in February, whatever the day that was, it was like, let's see if I scroll back up right here. February 11th was UFC 208. He was pulled from that fight. Yeah, man, he was gonna fight a guy named Jared Brooks at UFC 208. And Mccall was pulled from the fight the day of the fight because of being sick. And he explained it on the podcast about it was the easiest weight cut of his life, is what he said. He said he was just dropping pounds as if it was no problem. And he started trying to take in some water, and stuff because he was taking the weight down so easy, and he was like, well, man, I can enjoy myself a little bit. And he said something about he ate an entire cup of almonds and he drank some water. And he woke up the next morning and he was still solid. And he was like, okay. And then all of a sudden he gets sick, just out of nowhere. And his body would not rehydrate. Like, he just started puking and puking and puking. And the reason I wrote it down as a talking point, it was kind of controversial. Jeff Novitzky, who is the head guy at USADA, they've made it illegal that you cannot use IV bags anymore to rehydrate. It's illegal. If you get caught, you'll get a suspension. One of BJ Penn's fight, it might have been the when he was supposed to fight Ricardo Lamas. That fight got pulled off because BJ admitted to using an IV. You're not allowed to do that anymore. Well, the head of USADA gives Ian Mccall 2 IV bags because he is so sick. Come to find out, there's an exemption that if you are medically ill, that they will give you one, and if you're able to recover, I'm assuming if he was able to recover, that he was still going to be able to fight, because Novitzky himself, and one of the UFC doctors, he said his name, Dr. Dave, Dr. Dan, something like that, they gave him the IVs, two bags of fluids, and I don't remember off the top of my head, he said he took in by mouth so much water, I don't remember the exact amount. Woke up the next morning and his body had only put on 5 pounds, which means that out of all the water that he drank, he only put on 1 pound because the IV was 4 pounds, if I remember that correctly. And he was like, dude, something's not right. Oh, he's very sick, still puking and everything else, just couldn't keep anything down. And said it was getting closer and closer to fight time, and he said he was like, all right, guys, give me 2 more IV bags and give me some Zolfran. It's nausea medicine. Calm down my stomach, and I'll get a little get as well hydrated as I can, and, we'll do this thing. And they were like, no, we're not going to let you fight like this. You're done. We're pulling you. And, It's really sad in a way. I mean, that's 5 fights in a row. And he said that the UFC has been paying him his show money for each one of those fights. But at the same time, it's like he said on the Big Brown Breakdown today, UFC 208 was not that good of a card. Jim Miller and Dustin Poirier, they put on a good fight, very good fight. And they won fight of the night. This kid that he was supposed to face, Jared Brooks, is like an up-and-comer. It was going to be his first fight in the UFC, but he's got a little bit of a heat to his name. People claim that he is supposed to be pretty good. But he was going to go up against the number 6 flyweight in the world. Mccall was saying today, he was like, okay, they gave me $16,000 for showing up, even though I got sick. I had the potential of leaving with $32,000. And if me and that kid put on a show, a $50,000 bonus, that's $82,000. And I walked away with 16. And that's happened 5 times in a row. That could put a little bit of a strain on your wallet for sure. But yeah, man, the main talking point on that subject is the fact that he was allowed to have the IVs, but I guess it's a loophole in the system that no one had really discussed before about if you get to that point where you're that sick and they have to do something for you, because the way that they made it sound was if he would have gotten better, if his body would have took in and he would have rehydrated with IV bags, they were going to let him fight. So that's an interesting topic. So yeah, really, I'm interested to see what happens to Ian, because He said that he wouldn't lie that he had thought about retirement, um, which might not be the worst thing in the world for him, but at the same time, he's not that old. I think he's 32, and he's still pretty damn good. So it's just up to him what he wants to put his body through. He just has to get in the cage and actually have a fight. The first three times was not on him. The last two have been. So it's one of those things where you're like, man. The last point we have right here, and I'll wrap this thing up, is Roy McDonald and Paul Daley was signed to compete in Bellator. They had a face-off yesterday. They had a little thing to promote the fight. It was... This is going to be interesting. Rory has taken... it's been more than a year, I want to say, since the last time he fought. His last fight was when he fought Wonder Boy. And he left the UFC. He decided to sign with Bellator. This is going to be his first fight in Bellator. His last fight was on June 18th of 2016. Wow. I actually thought it had been longer than that. So, about 8 months or so, if the math is off the top of my head is correct, right? Because he had originally said that he wanted to take a year, but he said that his nose had progressed better than he thought it was going to, and that he thought it was okay to come back. And that was the reason that he wanted to take the break, was because of his nose. His nose got destroyed in that Robbie Lawler fight. Man, his nose was just, it was crushed. Well, my thoughts on him and Paul Daley. Everyone thought that Paul Daley was going to be matched up with Michael Venom Page. They were talking mad trash at each other on Twitter and everything else. MVP was putting out these funny memes and stuff and all kinds of stuff. Several people were talking about it. Brennan Schaub was talking about that fight on The Fighter and the Kid and so on and so forth. And just out of nowhere, it was reported, and it was reported by everyone, including ESPN. And for Bellator, of all promotions, to get on ESPN, usually in MMA, the only promotion you're going to see on ESPN is the UFC. ESPN even reported, had it on SportsCenter, that Roy McDonald was coming back and was going to fight Paul Daley. That's going to be big, man. That card, I want to say that card is going to be like UFC. It's going to be Bellator 170 something. 179. Bellator 179. That should be a good one, man. But I think Rory should be able to handle Paul. It's going to be very dangerous for Rory to stand and try to trade with Paul Daley. Paul Daley is very heavy-handed, man. He'll put you to sleep, man. His last fight against Brendan Ward, he landed a spinning elbow and then a flying knee and just split Brendan's eye just wide open. It was one of the nastiest gashes in the side of someone's face I'd ever seen. Right to the side of his eye, his left eye. And I mean, it was almost as wide as like my pinky. Just a nasty gash. That's going to be a good one, though. But, I mean, my early prediction for that would be, I think Rory wins it. And I would probably say it goes to a decision. Rory probably out-wrestle him, which would be smart on his part. Don't go in there, don't do anything stupid. Paul Daley is very good. He's very good with very heavy hands. He's a very elite striker. Very good. He would still be in the UFC right now if he wasn't an idiot and didn't punch Josh Koscheck after the bell. After the fight was completely over. The fight had been over for 10 seconds and he punched Koscheck, which was just ridiculous. And they kicked him out, and Dana White said he'd never let him back in. Yeah, but that should be a good one, man. I'm looking forward to that. I'm a fan of Rory. Rory is pretty good. If he could have lasted 2 minutes longer, I want to say, with Robbie Lawler, he would have been the champ. Because I want to say the scorecards came out for that fight after it was over. It was 1 minute into the 5th round, so he had 4 minutes to go. I want to say the scorecards came out and like afterwards, and all 3 judges had him up. Like it was either 3-1 or 4-0. It was something like that. I mean, he was well on his way to winning the fight. All he had to do was finish the 5th round, and he had it. But yeah, Rory is world class. World class without a doubt. He's easily top 5 welterweight in the world right now, and maybe even top 3 once you break it down and actually full blown look at it. Because the UFC's rankings right now is Woodley has the belt, Wonderboy is 1, and Damian Maia is 2. Roy McDonald beat Damian Maia. So, you know, and he also beat the current champion Tyron Woodley. The only person in that list that he lost to was Wonderboy. And Roy really didn't look like himself in that fight. I mean, that was his first fight back after just nearly getting beat to death by Robbie Lawler. They all both almost beat each other to death. That was insane. But yeah, man, I think that's gonna be it. I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. I covered my 3 talking points that I wanted to, and I covered the 3 main fights for Bellator 173. That's coming up this Friday, March 3rd. I will watch the card on Friday night, and then either that night, Friday night, or the next day, Saturday, I will put out a review of the card and just break down how the fights turned out and so on and so forth. But until then, I will talk to you guys next time. Y'all have a good one.